All right. Hi, I'm Haetham. Uh, I'm a managing and game director in a Bahraini game studio. Uh, I used to be a student in HSE, National Research University, High School of Economics. I'm an alumni of Masters in System and Software Engineering, and I've graduated back in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So that turned out great. Unfortunately, I was not able to stay there much longer. So I went back to Bahrain and basically started my own studio. I'm going to take you through the whole story and describe a lot more into how you can get into game development and get into the game industry in general. Okay, so let's do it. So I'm going to cover who am I and why am I allowed to talk about this topic. We'll have a bit of an icebreaker to just show you what I've been going through so far. I'll show you how to become a game developer from scratch for some of the audience that might not have any game industry experience. I'll show you the business models that are related into game development. Like once you start up a game studio or even an indie studio, how you can make money and in what way. I will show you the roles that you can fill in game development, even if you're not a developer as in a coder yourself. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. But of course, between each one of these sections, I'll try to have a bit of a break so you guys can ask any questions whenever you'd like. All right, so let's do it. Okay, as I said, I'm Haetham. I'm a graduate in Masters in System and Software Engineering. And why am I qualified? Because I've taught over 500 students in game development, including students in HEC, about game development, mainly in Unity. I have almost 10 years of experience, or actually even more than that. Combined experience first as an IT support, and then I climbed the career ladder up to IT manager. But I've always had passion to get into game development since I was a kid. But the game industry in the region was basically non-existent. So I had to teach myself everything from scratch. When I had the scholarship for my master's, I had the chance to take it seriously and started doing it regularly, not just as a hobbyist, but also started doing contracting for different studios. And then I managed to get into it full time instead of working in IT. I've worked on a lot of projects. A lot of them did not see the light of day because that's the nature of game development. You can work for something or on something for quite some time, but sometimes it just dies out because maybe it's not fun, or maybe the funding dies, or lots of reasons basically. I've worked on games on mobile and even PC that garnered a lot of attention, that got downloaded or even played more than 1 million times. Okay, so let's have a bit of an icebreaker and let's play this mini game, I suppose. Which one of these do you think is a lie? So, one, our team has worked on over 10 projects in under a year. Two, one of our team had to swim with sharks to learn how to animate them. Or three, some of the projects we worked on generated or garnered millions in revenue. So, which ones of these do you think that are, not true? You can just type in the chat, I suppose. Oh, wait, let me show these just in case you want to take a read. Just type those in the chat and look over them and just say which one is actually false. And took a break. Oh, okay. 2 or 3. Some of the projects we worked on generated millions of revenue. Actually, that's true. 2 is the false one, of course, because you don't really need to swim with sharks. You can just watch a bunch of videos and you'd learn how to animate them. Plus, sharks, if you think about it, they don't have much to animate aside from the jaw, right? So yeah. The other one is one I have slept in the office once. You might go through that if you ever work. Game studios don't know for sure the game they're making until they actually get into development. As in, even if they plan the game 100%, they still don't know what they're making. They still don't know what's going to come out in the end, basically. Is that true or false? Or you can make a game, a AAA title, like let's say Stalker or Fallout or any other famous AAA game like Fortnite in 1 year if you do it in Unreal Engine. Which one do you think is false? Oh. Again, it's two. Okay, everybody's on two. Weirdly enough, that is a true one. A lot of game studios don't know if the game that they're going to release is the same one that they've done pre-production for. A lot of these studios have a general plan of what the game should be in the end, like pillars basically, of what the game should be. And then within development, they have to make certain choices in order to release the game. So sometimes they want the game to have 8K textures, for example, or really high graphics. But when they hit with reality, they see that, for example, a lot of their audiences don't have machines that can support them, so they have to level it down. So yeah, expect a lot of change, expect a lot of prototyping, and I'll talk about this more next up. But basically, the lie is this one. Because you can never make a AAA game in 1 year. Nobody has done it before unless you are a humongous studio that have maybe hundreds of employees and you have already done it before, like games like Call of Duty. I remember like they've done some Call of Duty titles within a year and a half or so, but never within a year because there's a lot of content that they need to create for the game to be successful and release at time. So this one is the lie, basically. All right, so let's carry on. Oh, started from the very beginning. Let's keep going. All right, so what's the path to game development? How do you become a game development even if you're not a game developer currently? First things first, you'd have to learn the basics of programming. So it can be any programming language that you have in mind. What I would recommend is starting from the easiest one, which is Python, of course, unless you have a specific route you want to take. Like, for example, if you really want to get into game development head first, I would totally recommend getting into Unity because it's basically I taught kids how to use it within a month, basically. So you don't even need to learn a lot of coding because you can do visual scripting on it. So you can basically have just logic blocks that you can connect together and make up a small game through it. So it's not really difficult field to get into. It's just a very difficult field to become competitive in. The second step, of course, after learning a programming language, as I said, is to choose an engine. By choosing a game engine, what I mean is, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there are two main engines in game development right now that are open sourced and that can be used by any game developer. They're Unity and Unreal Engine, basically. You've got other mainstream game engines, but these are the, I'd say, the most sought after. So Unreal Engine being the one for, I'd say, open world RPG titles and very heavy stuff, while Unity is like proving itself more to be the lightweight version of a game engine that can provide you with platformers, mobile games, smaller experiences, and the like. And step three, I'd say to read, and read some more because You'd need to learn from past experiences. You'd need to know more about the industry as a whole and the components of what a game, the components of a game, of the game itself that needs to be consisted of to know where you can go with the project once you're inside of it. So, for example, if you just uh, start creating a game as a game developer, as in a game programmer, for example, you'll notice that you're going to need the help of an artist. And then you notice later on that you're going to need the help of an animator or even a game writer or even somebody to do project management for all of these roles. So the more you learn about the process itself, the more you read into the process, the more you watch others do their game projects, the more you learn how to do it yourself. And above all else, I'd say to network. Networking is such an essential thing in game development because nobody's going to know about your woes or your problems unless you talk about them to other people. So you won't face a lot of issues once you get into game development as in the industry itself in the beginning because everybody has faced these problems. But once you get into making very specific games, that's when you're going to need to have a backup of people that you can rely on to ask for guidance or even get mentorship off of. Okay, so let's go next. And once you master programming, once you get into a game engine and start getting into these Discord communities or even Reddit or even VK has communities for game development, once you get into those, you just keep practicing, you keep learning and improving depending on feedback that you share of the games that you have already made. You get feedback from them and then you just keep improving on the game. Once you do that, you're going to learn a lot. And since you're learning, you're continuously learning, it's like sooner or later, you're always going to get to a point where somebody's going to pick up on your progress and say that, wow, you're amazing, please come work with me. So, and that's basically how it happened with me as well. So I just kept creating games on my own time and just kept creating prototypes, editing games, creating these small mechanics because I found it to be fun. And suddenly, out of nowhere, somebody contacted me because they wanted me for a job. Okay. One thing to remember, though, is that game development takes dedication and passion. So, of course, anyone can become a game developer relatively, but you'd need to put in the work, and the work is immense. It's not like software development, for example. It needs a lot of passion, it needs a lot of hours that you can put into it. It takes a lot of drive and consistency to just keep doing the so you can just keep working on it as much as you can and putting in the hours to keep it polished. So working on a game project is a lot like sculpting a 3D, I'd say sculpting a 3D mesh, where you just have to chisel in and make sure that it's polished enough so you can show it to people. Because you don't want to show people something that is unfinished because it would feel embarrassing. That's why you just keep working on it, no matter how long it takes, until you reach a state where you're proud of it and then just show it to people for feedback. But of course, game is like art. So even if you work on something for many years and then think that it's absolutely beautiful, sometimes you share it to someone and they think it's absolute crap, for example. And so it's very subjective, I'd say. So it's very important that you keep a very open mind to criticism, so you don't feel emotionally attached to what you're creating, and thinking not thinking of it like a child that when they say that, oh, the game looks ugly, you feel hurt, but think of it like, oh, okay, I can now improve. I now know that I need to improve on my art skills, for example, or on my polishing skills, for example. Okay. Now, is game development easy? Absolutely not. I've never mentioned easy. It's I'd say it's straightforward to get into, but not easy in the long run. There is a video here about John Carmack. I don't know if I can open it, but I'll share this presentation with you guys later. But basically, what he said in one of his videos about rocket science, John Carmack is the developer of Doom. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but it's a very old FPS game. It's one of the oldest FPS games. I think it's the yeah, Unreal Tournament was the first FPS game, and then Doom came out of it, came right after it. So John Carmack actually said, and he works in the aerospace sector. He worked like back then. Now he works on Oculus. I don't know if you've heard about it as well. It's the VR headset thing. He actually said that the work that he did in video games is far more complicated than aerospace work, which means that working in game development is a lot more harder, is a lot harder than working in rocket science, for instance, which I absolutely agree on. Like you can get into some issues. Oh, yeah, the veggie actually works, so I'm gonna share with you guys later. But you can actually get into some issues that nobody knows how to solve. You can read a lot in research papers, but you eventually reach no end in sight. And sometimes, if you're not resilient enough, as I said, if you're not dedicated enough into the game process, the game development process, you'd feel like let down and just you're just gonna let it go and just find another job or even work on a different game. So it's very important to be resilient and I'd say persistent as well. Okay. So how did I get into game development? How did I open up a studio? How do you go and venture to do something like that? I'm gonna try to explain it in like as lightly as possible, but if you guys have any questions later, I'll be more than happy to answer those. Okay, so first of all, you'd need to make money, right? Making a game. So there are a lot of business models that you can follow. The current vibe in the games industry of like the fastest way to make money is, I would say, is through making mobile games. Like casual, hyper casual titles. I'm sure every one of you has seen ads of these really stupid games maybe on social media of this stick man moving around and just destroying stuff, or even an endless runner of a stick man. So these are everywhere, but the funny thing is that they're everywhere because they make money. So they're free to play, but of course you've noticed they have a lot of ads, and that's the way they make money. Basically, they don't pay. You don't need to pay to play them, but it's kind of like you're paying with your eyes to play them. So yeah, that's one way to go about making games, I suppose, making them getting them to make you money. And another way to do it is to do it the pay to play route, where you charge an amount of money to get your game sold. Something like Fallout or Metro Exodus or Atomic Heart or any other premium game that you can find on Steam. That's basically pay to play. And then you've got the subscription-based games, which are basically MMOs like Genshin Impact, World of Warcraft, any MMO you can think of. Even though you'd think like that they're free to play, but some of them you have to literally subscribe for to get something or even play the game itself. Like for World of Warcraft, they're not going to let you play that game unless you literally pay them monthly. Other games, they have these subscription-based models like a Battle Pass, I'd say, where you don't need to pay for, but it's like the game has a free section and then a paid section that has a lot of awesome stuff. So that's why you need to subscribe to get that. And the fourth one is what we're actually doing at our studio is basically outsourcing. So we provide game development services to any of these categories to realize their projects. And in return, they pay us like I'd say an employee. They pay us like an employee, as in paying us a salary to help them finish their games. It really depends from project to project, but sometimes you get into art or development or production or animation. It really depends from project to project. But basically, it's a way to make money even if you don't have any product. Like if you've noticed, I've been talking about games here, like products, certain products that you need to have in order to generate money for you. Over here, you don't need a product. You are actually the product that needs to work for itself to generate that revenue. Okay? Now, how to, like, which one of these would you do and why? I'm going to talk about it here. So it really depends from one person or from one situation or from one studio to the other. But the main reason why somebody would choose something here over the other is funds, I'd say. Because funds determine the length of the project that you can work on or what you can actually do in terms of, projects. So, for example, if you want to create a subscription-based game like an MMO, that's going to take a lot of time, and that's going to need a huge team, right? So you'd need a humongous amount of funding to be able to create such a game. Going back to pay to play, for example, again, you're gonna depending on the project itself, you're definitely going to need funding because the game, you have nothing to generate income out of unless you release a game. Like if you, let's say you're CD Projekt Red or even Rockstar, for example, you're creating a GTA-like game, okay? You have to rely on the games that you have released and their success to be able to generate money from them and work on your next game. So you're basically relying on older games to, let's say, fuel the newer ones. As in free to play, this one is the quickest to develop again. You can even do this right now. You can also work on a pay to play game, but this one is the quickest because, as I said, it focuses on ads. The quality is a lot lower, and the bar is basically the quality bar is not really that high, especially since free to play has been mostly focused on mobile platform. So you have free to play titles on PC, on web, on whatever, but it's very congested on the mobile platform because, as I said, the quality bar is lower. You have a development cycle that can take months instead of years, where you're talking about these categories. So it can generate money quickly if you create a very, I'd say, addictive game, for example. But of course, in many cases, your first games are not going to be successful. So in many cases, these are just going to be like, either dead projects or maybe projects that do not generate that much revenue to begin with. This approach, though, is the one that I followed when I first started up my studio. And this one has been working perfectly for us, and we're sticking by it because it allows you to become sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean that it pays what you need for your business to grow and scale and continue along the, I'd say, years or even months. Why you might want to go through this route? Let's say you want to get into game development, but you don't have the funds, which was my situation back then. I had absolutely no funds to work on a game project. So the only solution to me was to provide my time as a commodity, as a service, to help these other, I'd say, studios release their games. And at the same time, actually, we're getting into free to play to be able to release our own games. So going into a certain category does not mean that you're going to stick to it for life. Nope. you can switch and go back and forth, especially if you're a huge studio. You can mix and match, and you can even go like change direction entirely of the whole studio to go to a specific category. Like even for Bethesda right now, that the game studio that created Skyrim, I hope you've heard about this game. The Skyrim, for example, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim is pay to play, but they have an MMO called the Elder Scrolls Online that is subscription based. That used to be subscription actually. Now it's for free. It's free now. It's free to play, and they also have mobile games that are free to play. So these guys are actually doing it all basically, except outsourcing. They don't outsource their game development services, but yeah, they do it all basically. So yeah, it depends on your situation. Before taking such a step, I'd recommend starting with a friend, especially if you're an indie developer that you're just starting out. Start up with a friend that completes your abilities. Let's say you're a developer and you need some artist, for example. You need art for your games, then just have a partner that is an artist and just collaborate with him or her to create your own, I'd say, free-to-play games. Because as I said, these are a lot faster to release and have much more turnover, honestly. Okay. So yeah, funds, that's how you make funds. And resources, you'd have to, as I said, collaborate with as many people as you can, as many people as you can find around you. And in terms of goals, it really depends on your outlook. Like my goal one day is to create an open world RPG, something similar to Skyrim, something similar to The Witcher, something similar to Metro 2033. I just love RPGs and open world games. If you like games like Candy Crush, then yeah, you wouldn't need a lot of funds because that's a very small scale game. If you like games like Tetris, I'd say, or puzzle games or small, I'd say, platformers, then you're not going to need a lot of resources or funds. But because my goal is open world RPGs, then yeah, it needs a lot of funds, it needs a lot of resources, and that's why I have to pursue outsourcing to get to it. But as I said, if you're in love with games like Crash Bandicoot, then you can create a free-to-play game that would not really cost you much in terms of funds nor resources. As I said, if you can just collaborate with an animator and a 3D modeler, then that's it. If you were a developer, I mean. Then that's it. You just need to create a character, the environment, some levels, and that's it. You've got a Crash Bandicoot replica, basically. Okay, so this gets into explaining the categories some more, but yeah, pay to play is commonly used, as I said, in console, PC games. You don't see them much in mobile, even though if you see them, they don't garner that much attention as compared to these platforms, I'd say. The dependency is, as I said, humongous amount of funds. You need a lot of money to be able to create a game that rises to the quality bar of these platforms. The way you can get funds, of course, there are many ways. These are one of them. I'm going to get into them some more, but you can get them through an investor, whether it's angel investors or VCs, venture capitalists, or publishers, game publishers. I'm going to talk about this some more later on. You can use your personal savings, but I would not recommend that, just in case, because you might like create a game and then does not get any attention, and then you'd say, oh, Haetham recommended me to spend my savings and now I'm homeless. So don't do that. Instead, you can generate your own money by doing work for hire. Work for hire meaning like selling your own time to, as I said, work on other game projects to generate money, and you can create your own game in the process. Crowdfunding is also a solution, part of investment, I think. You can just put your game on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, for example, and if people really like it, then you can go ahead and continue developing it. I'd say this one is the safest route, crowdfunding, because at that stage you would know how much attention the game uh, got, basically uh, from the audiences, from the target audience that you had in mind, and you would have a backing. You'd know that, okay, they have spent, for example, $500,000 on crowdfunding the game, so there is a huge amount of attention to create this game. And if you get no crowdfunding, that does not mean that your game sucks. It's just that sometimes, I'm not going to say sometimes, like all the times, marketing is very important. So it takes I'd say, a huge chunk of why games are successful or not. Okay, now free to play, Fortnite is one of them, and it generates revenue, as I said, through advertising or even in-game purchases like skins, battle passes, or stuff like that. As I said, commonly used in mobile games and their online games as well, on more particularly mobile or even PC. Why do they need to make these online? Because the only way you'd continuously buying into something is if you're sharing it with other people. So why do we have the need to purchase skins, for example, for our characters? Is because if we want to, let's say, flaunt them or even show them off to our friends or even strangers online. So if you ever played this game like Fortnite, you're gonna notice it's completely free. You can like play it infinitely for free, but you can buy something additional to just look cool in front of your friends, or even, as I said, show off the amount of money you have by buying some special skins, I'd say. Subscription based is, of course, World of Warcraft. This one is still on, strangely enough. People are still buying, like still paying for the subscription month in, month out. Maybe some of you here are. I'm going to ask about that later on. People really like the experience in the video game, and I'd say it's very polished. And it deserves it because they keep putting content, they keep polishing the game, and it is one of the hugest, I'd say, one of the biggest environments that were ever created at the time. So to get into such a project took a lot of time, took a lot of effort, and took a lot of resources as well. So it's well deserved as a subscription. This one can definitely be a steady stream of revenue for the whole game studio for years. So World of Warcraft as a project basically just kept generating money for them for like a very long time, that they did not do any other side projects or any other, I'd say, project in general. So they just focused on the game itself and just kept adding content and polishing, and yeah, it just kept going through the years. I think it's been 20 years now, even, yeah, it's been 20 years or so since they released the game, and it's still going on. Okay, outsourcing, that's us, basically. It revolves around offering game development services to any one of these. So you don't have a product yourself, which means that's really low risk. There is no risk that you're taking. The only risk is finding the clients. The only risk is finding people that need help. Otherwise, you have absolutely no risk, whether you make the project or you don't make the project, whether you finish the project or not. About it. It's a very new game. Let's say you're an outsourcing studio working on Hogwarts Legacy. So Warner Brothers, creators of this video game, by the way, Warner Brothers Studios would say like, hey, could you please create the system for the open world levels? And that's when you're going to say, oh, okay, cool, let's do it. So you as an outsourcing studio would only focus on creating levels, for example, or only focus on creating the buildings inside of a level while they focus on something else entirely. So some studios like even Bethesda for Fallout or even their newer games, they would hire outsourcing agencies to either create 3D art or even help them with scripting or even create new features entirely, etc. So as I said, it's very low risk. It's not high reward, of course, because these are very high risk but have high reward at the same time. Uh, that's why if you have absolutely no money, this is the way to go. Basically, if you're starting up a new studio, of course, this is the way to go to actually generate income. And once your basically, let's say, chest is filled with gold, then you can pursue, I'd say, maybe free to play or even pay to play if you have enough funds to sustain yourself for a lot of time. I've mentioned funding, and there are, as I said, a bunch of types of funding that you can pursue. You can either fund the games that you create on your own, so you'd use the power of your own pockets. But again, I would not recommend it. I would definitely recommend this choice. I'll get into it in a bit. Or you can start up your own studio. You can create the game. You can work on it for free, of course. Nobody's there to pay you. And then go to an angel investor or basically a VC to fund you and get a chunk of your studio or a chunk of your, I'd say, maybe game project. And once you release, you can share the profits together. You can pursue crowdfunding, the power of the people to get as much money as possible by selling them the idea of the game, because you don't actually have the game when you're crowdfunding. You're just showing them that, okay, you can create this game within this time frame, so give me this amount of money so I can create the game and you guys have fun. So they don't own anything in the game. They just, I'd say, own a copy of it. So it's like they bought the game before it was released. Like it's basically like pre-purchasing on Steam, for example, but it's a lot earlier. Of course, there is no I'd say proof that the game is going to get released or not. Depending on where you are based, I'm sure this exists in Russia. You can get government grants to develop or even start up your own studio. So that's very possible. You just need to apply for it. They want nothing in return most of the time. They just want to see the economy growing, so they'd be more than happy to support you with however they can. You can pursue a publisher, and a publisher would basically act like a governing body on your game. So they would take care of you finishing the game no matter what. So they're going to pay you like salaries, for example, to keep working on the game. And when it's released, they're going to take it from your hands. They're going to market it themselves. And the deal would be whatever you guys have agreed upon before getting into the game project. So some of them actually tell you that, okay, we're going to handle marketing and publishing it on all of the stores like PC, Steam, itch.io, for example, GOG, and then PlayStation and Xbox, etc. The only caveat would be that you're going to have to accept that they're going to take a chunk of the game forever, basically. So it's like you've agreed that they're going to take 25 or 50% or whatever percentage of the game sales for the rest of like the game's life. Client funded is what we're doing right now, and what a lot of studios are doing as well. A lot of agency-based studios are doing. is that they depend on the funding of clients. They depend on the funding of these, for example, game studios, get the money they need. So they fuel themselves with the money they get out of selling their time to create their own game projects if they can. And that's why we're surviving. I've started the studio back in April 2021, and we're still standing today because of this. We still have not created any game that is noteworthy, honestly, as a studio, and we're the only thing that's keeping us afloat is being paid by clients. If I was funding the studio out of my own pockets, it would never survive because we're a team of 15 almost people. So we need a constant flow of funding, which means a constant flow of having clients. So the only way that I can get out of this is by creating a game, and that game hits. But I can't rely completely on making a game that is a hit, because you can never know if the game is going to be a hit or not. So that's why we're relying on very, I'd say, stable clients to fund us. And once we reach a stage that we can become fully dependent, that's when we can create our own game and basically hope that it's a hit and we can sustain ourselves to not have clients. Of course, there are a lot of positive things that you can have when you're working in such an environment that's client funded, namely that you are going to learn from your clients for free. So let's say, for example, you have 1 million in funds right now in your pocket, okay? And you just want to create the next Skyrim. You would have to pay yourself so much because you're going to need to learn everything from scratch: how to create an open world, how to create level design, how do you do 3D modeling, how do you animate humanoids, how do you animate creatures, how do you create particle effects, shaders, etc., etc., etc. But if you actually provide your time, as a commodity to these studios, it's going to be like they're teaching you and they're paying you to learn. So it's like they're paying you to learn how to develop their games, so you can become better, of course. And at the same time, you're getting money. Like, imagine you being at the university now and you're being paid to do your homework. So that's basically it. That's basically what's working in an agency like. You're getting paid to learn how to develop the product that the client wants in the most efficient way, I'd say. So it's very positive in that regard. The only negative thing, actually, that I'm facing right now is that we don't have enough time to dedicate to our own game. So we want to release something, we want to work on our own game, or even games, but we don't really have the time to dedicate for it. We're fully booked to work with clients. So that's the only caveat I say. So if you really hate working on other people's projects or other people's dream games, then definitely this track is definitely not for you. Sorry. Okay. I suppose let's take a quick break to get any questions, if you guys have any, about these before we move forward and talk about I'd say, the roles of a game development studio. Oh. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please shoot me. I don't know why it's white. Oh, okay. Refreshed.
There is a question right in the chat.
Sure. Oh, I've seen that. Okay. Okay, I guess they have pre-production stage. Unity is not open source. Yes, okay, let's talk about the comments first, I'd say, before we move forward. Don't want to deprive you of those. Let me just go to the slide itself. Wait. Yeah, funding. Okay, Unity is not open source as far as I'm concerned. It is not, which is an issue, I agree. But it can be open source if you pay, which is which is another big issue, if you're willing to pay for the, I think it's the enterprise license, you can get access to their basically repository where they keep the source code for the game engine. While Unreal Engine is actually open source, and you can uh, go dive deep into the, I think it's 2 million, or is it even more? I think it's more than that. 2 million lines of code game engine. But essentially, honestly, I have never had that need to access the source code for Unity to develop something. Mainly because I don't want to be offensive to them, but mainly because their game engine is so broken that tweaking something is probably gonna break in another thing. While, like for example, you don't face this issue in Unreal Engine because it's well packaged and it's pretty clean. While with Unity, everything is in preview, everything is being edited all the time. You have so many versions that uh, like a lot of the versions that come out normally fix something and break something else. So it's really, I would say, unwise to tap into game engine, I'd say, source code editing unless you're really sure about what you're doing. Next one, should casual mobile game as Candy Crush, for example, be monetized at the beginning, or it should be totally free? Okay, that's a really good question still. Okay, so in any game project, they tend to discuss monetization as early as possible because it determines how the game is going to be played and how it's going to be released and how it's going to be conveyed by the target audience as a first impression basis, right? So when you want to work on a game, you don't want to finish it and then think about, okay, let's just add ads here, or let's just add, skins now. Let's just create a bunch of skins and add it to the character. No, it has to be planned very thoroughly in the pre-production stage. So you have 3 stages mainly for game development. The first one is called pre-production, and then the middle one is called production, and then you've got post-production. So pre-production is where you do game design documentation. So you create let's say you create the Bible of the game, where it has everything about the game, how it's going to be played, what kind of monetization it has, which platforms it's going to be released on, who is the target audience, and for example, what is the market like for this kind of game? Is there a market for it, or am I just speculating that it's going to be a complete success, etc.? So typically, going back to your question, is that monetization is the essence of every game. If you don't plan it out from the very beginning, it can ruin the game later on. So imagine if you release a game like Candy Crush, for example, that is very awesome, and then you add ads, and everybody hates those and just starts uninstalling the game. Then that would ruin everything, right? Okay. So thanks for the smiles. If Battle Pass is a subscription model, then free-to-play model relies only on ads. Well, Battle Pass is, I'd say, Battle Pass is a miniature subscription model, I'd say. Yeah, Battle Pass, a miniature subscription model. Because a subscription model, just like World of Warcraft, enforces that to you. It forces you to pay to play, basically, in a regular manner to continue playing this video game. So a free-to-play game, I'd say, has the free version that you can play whenever you want, and then you can add on top of it. You can add a battle pass to it. You can add ads to it. You can add in-app purchases for it, just like Fortnite, for example. So, yep, I hope that is clear. Okay, Dimitri. When you test your game, you may need to test them on new players, but if you do it too often, you may run out of friends, relatives. Okay, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. It's not using outsourced official labor that signed contract, not tell anyone about. Okay. Uh, when I test the game, I may need to test them on new players. You always need to test on new players, by the way. So that's a good point. If you do it too often, you may run out friends or people that test the game for you, and you do run into this problem. Okay, how do I solve it, or how did I solve it? Okay, this goes back into networking, and that's how we solved it working on our own game currently. So let's get back to this slide. Yeah, this is why I said the 4 steps of becoming a game developer is networking, because even if you show, as I said, games are very subjective. You can consider them as an art piece, right? Someone might find a video game to be really interesting, really fun, while somebody else might find the same game incredibly boring. And not to mention that you can have different game taste as you age, right? So, for example, I had a very different taste for Souls-like games. I I completely hated them until I started playing Bloodborne and Elden Ring, for example. Yeah. So I completely hated Souls-like games until I played those games. I just fell in love with them. If you were to give me Dark Souls 1 to play as a playtester, I'd completely hate it. I would tell you to stop developing these kind of games. But now that I've tried a very different version of it, and now that I've grown to love them for some reason, I started liking them. So to go back to your question, how do you find people to continuously test your game to make sure that it's fun, to make sure that it caters to the audience that you want? I'd say network. Get into as many game communities as possible. And honestly, you have a lot of game communities in Russia. And especially if you're based in Moscow, I hope you guys are, there are a lot of game communities. Like, I remember being there, it was definitely a lot better than the game industry here in the GCC or Bahrain in general. So there are a lot of gamers. Like, I've never met a Russian that did not play Counter-Strike, for example. I know a lot of Russians that played Counter-Strike with me back then and just had a version of CSGO or CS 1.6 and played around with. So you have a lot of game communities there. I'd say invest your time in knowing as many people over there as possible. The second way you can get feedback on your game, if it's in a such polished state, I would recommend releasing it in early access, for example, in Steam or even Itch. Yeah, itch.io has an early access category. You can release the game there. People online, if they think they're interested in your game, they can just start testing it out. And you can put a small form in the game that you're creating to say, did you like this video game? Please rate it, for example, or please give me feedback. Please fill out this form. If people are interested enough, they can basically fill it out. But yeah, don't overuse your friends and relatives, I'd say. Try to get fresh minds to test out your game because it's very essential. Because this, if you keep just focusing on this small group, they might be biased because they might like you as a person, right? Because they might love you or like you as a person. So they would feel like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. So I'm going to tell them that, oh, the game is very fun. You're creating the next AAA title while the game might be crap again, right? So please try to network as much as you can and show it to strangers as much as possible so you can get the purest I'd say feedback. But of course, do not rely 100% on the feedback itself because it can be just, either jealousy or lies. Like, don't depend on a single person's feedback. Try to depend on the collective. If everybody's telling you that the game has bright colors, then that's the problem. But if one person out of 20 people says that, oh, the game sucks, it's really boring, then it might be that person, right? So, yeah, be very selective in your feedback. Try to use analytics. Try to use, I'd say, try to use common sense when looking at feedback, because some people are going to come out and tell you, oh, this game can be a lot better. You just need to do this one huge thing that takes years to make. And yeah, to them, they just want to express their opinion. But to you, it's very huge. You can't do it. So it doesn't matter. Okay, Alexander. What are the best communities to build networking? Discord, my man. Discord. Here it is, actually. It's right there. It's opened. So I'm going to share a bunch of, I'd say, servers. I hope we have a way to communicate with each other like after this. But if not, you can join our Discord server. You can talk to me anytime. I'm going to post my email. I'm going to post my Discord handle. You can talk to me anytime. The best way, I'd say, to network with other developers is by, I guess, it's by either Discord or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very professional, so unless you want to get into game development and work in that, I'd say, work in that industry, then use LinkedIn to network. But if you're just looking to create games and have fun and meet people in a very casual way, I definitely recommend Discord. Okay, that's a good break. Then let's get back to it a bit. Where was I? Wait, let me just have a quick break. I'm gonna drink some water. Just a sec. All right. All that talking made me parched. Sorry. Okay. So let's keep going. No. Well, let's just play from beginning. Okay. We go all the way to core roles. Yeah, this is interesting. I'm assuming that all of you guys are developers, are actual programmers. But as I said, creating a game, making a game is a very, I'd say, collective process. So normally, of course, there are exceptions, like games like Stardew Valley, if you guys have heard of it. The developer of that video game literally created everything in the game, but it took him like 4 years to do it. I'm sure if it was a whole team, they would have done it in less than a year, maybe 6-8 months maximum. But since he wanted to do everything himself, it took him like 4 years to create the whole thing in terms of development, art, story, dialogue, everything. So generally, if you want to make it a fun process, I'd say find your own team or even get into teams that like to do the type of games that you want to do. Because making a game is a lot like eating food, I'd say. Yeah, you don't want to eat food on your own. It feels lonely, it feels sad. But eating food with other people is much more friendly, much more fun, I'd say. It can even become something that has more engagement once you eat like food with other people rather than eating it on your own. But to each his own, to each their own, I suppose. Some people like to do game development on their own, but from what I've seen, if you do it collectively, then you have better control on your development process. Because as I said before, since it's an art, then something that you might find beautiful might look completely ugly to other people. So it's really good to have somebody to shoot off ideas off, to share ideas with, to basically think of the same project from very different perspectives to add to the project itself. So let's get back to it. If you were to form a team, or if you were to start up your own studio, these are the general roles that you would typically have in a game studio. So you would have the game director, who's directing the game itself, the project itself. You'd have the game designer, who designs everything in the game. Not an artist, mind you. They're not artists. They design the game, as in they make the mechanics. They're the ones that say, what is the speed of the player? How high the player can jump? What are the contents of level 1 or level 2 or level 3? Where does the cutscene begin and where does it end? How much health does the player have? How much health does the enemies have? How much damage can the player do with this type of weapon, etc. So you've got a writer, a scripter even, to create the dialogue, to create the lore, to create the basically the story behind the cutscenes even, etc. And then the game artist, right here, where these are the people who are in charge of creating anything visual that you see in the game. A game producer is basically a sub-game director. So this guy mainly helps this guy to manage these people, make sure that they deliver on what they need to do to release the game. At the same time, maybe you'll notice, but these are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. This guy makes sure that these are all communicating together efficiently, and nobody is kept out of the loop. So the programmer knows what kind of art is being done. The audio engineer knows what level he or she needs to create for the level to be like the sounds for the level itself. The writer knows what kind of cutscenes they need to make for the game, because they're communicating with the designer. And of course, last but not least, the quality assurance team or the game testers. These guys mainly focus on breaking the game as much as they can and document it. So let's go into them one by one. The game director, as I said, he runs the show. He or she runs the show. Make sure that you have all what you need for the game project. They run the game project as a project manager. They make sure that you're following the whole timeline. They give the general consensus of what the game can be and what cannot be. They have everything set out from funds, from guidelines, from project management, from milestones, etc. The game producer is like an assistant of the game director, but this one is more hands-on. They focus on day-to-day operations. So they check in with a lot of they check in with almost all of them every day to make sure that the development process is going smoothly, that everything is being delivered on time, that the communication is efficient between all parties, and everything has what they need. Everyone have what they need to continue pushing this proverbial ball of snow, for example. Okay, and the game designer, this guy mainly focuses on creating the content in the game. So the artist, for example, creates a 3D model of a chicken, okay? Or let's say the 3D model of this ant right here. So the game designer is in charge of saying, where does this ant exist in this environment? Where is it gonna go? Like when the player goes through here? Where is this ant gonna go? Is this ant going to escape if the player goes close to it? Is this ant going to bite the player when they go near it, etc. Basically, uh, is this ant going to scream or even talk to the player? So the game designer configures all this stuff from within the game engine. Some game designers know how to script, as in do some coding to help them with that. Some of them use tools within the game engine to do whatever they want within the editor of the game engine. Okay, and then you've got the game artist. No need to explain that. Everything you've seen here, everything you see here. So anything that is a 3D model, 2D, UI, font, whatever, is actually done by the artist. Even animations at some extent. The game developer is the person that codes everything in the game, whether it's networking, tools, gameplay programming, or even what else? What else is there? Scripting for, let's say, what an NPC needs to do, what an AI needs to do for the whole game, for example, in terms of what's their job for the whole game. Sound designer is everything you hear in the game is normally made by them. I recommend looking at sound designers for horror games. These are very interesting, and they use their environment so efficiently to create the sounds that terrify you basically in games. And the game tester basically tries to find stuff like this one. You see this broken dog right here. So I would be basically putting it in a ticket and then putting the description that this dog is broken in slide, I don't know, is it slide 20, whatever. So this dog is broken in slide this. Please, developer, fix this. Okay, and then the game writer, it's self-explanatory as well. They write the story, quests, and adventure. Not in all cases you need a game writer. For example, let's think of games like hyper casual games for mobile. For example, you don't need a game writer for that. Even a producer, actually, you don't need them for all projects. Some roles here are not really that mandatory, depending on the studio size or even the game development team size. So unless your ready game is very story dependent, you don't really need a writer. Okay, let's talk about the hierarchy or the structure of a typical game studio. I hope you guys can see this. Oh, I can choose a pen. Oh, that's a lot easier. Okay, so typically, when you're a game studio, you have somebody giving you a game project. Either you come up with a game project as a team, as a whole team, okay? Like, for example, Rockstar comes up with a new GTA title, or Bethesda comes up with a new new The Elder Scrolls title, or even new Fallout title. So they don't need a client for that. They have their own game project. So once they have an idea set up, they, of course, before doing that, as I said before, they do pre-production. They do it in a game design document to make sure that they are following whatever idea that they have in mind. So the structure of the teams would be mainly leads at the beginning, lead game art, lead designer, game designer, lead game developer, lead quality assurance, and then lead game producer. So these teams would consist of different roles. So art, for example, art team would have 2D artists, 3D artists, UI, UX, animators, etc., anything that is visual within the game. The game designer would use the art of the art team to create the world, as in a level designer, and then the game writer is going to make sure that the art is being used in a way that follows the game design document, for example. And then there are a lot of other roles within game design that have nothing to do with art, but have to do with the engine, and also do not have to do with any scripting. So, for example, there's a mm, game mechanics designer. For example, for any fast-paced game like Valorant or Apex Legends, these fast-paced games have people, dedicated people that need to look into the game mechanics, need to look into game balancing to make sure that the special abilities of specific characters are not really overpowered. So these people are very exposed to the game engine, but not really that exposed to the scripting or game development. You've got the development team as well, which focuses on creating the mechanics, creating the tools needed for the development, and even adding multiplayer support, even publishing support to be able to release the games on different platforms like Steam. Quality assurance, again, are people that focus on if the game is working right. There is never a game that is released bug-free. You can never find a game that is absolutely 100% bug-free, but you can polish it enough in order to make it look like it's polished to a state that it is very clean, it is very beautiful, and you cannot see any bugs. Like, for example, I'd say games from Naughty Dog. Yeah, like The Last of Us. I'm sure you guys have heard of it if you're gamers or even if you're avid watchers of series. The Last of Us, for example, is a very polished title, even on PlayStation back then. It's coming out, I think, this month as well. So the reason why it's very polished is because they're testing it heavily and they just have that mantra of releasing games that are very polished. You can see the same thing in God of War titles. But again, you can't really control the quality if your game is huge. So for games like Cyberpunk, I'm sure if you ever played that game, you think that it's basically a piece of crap because they didn't really pay much attention to the development or the testing phase, or it got released way too early that they did not have enough time to polish it to a state where it was acceptable. And why? Because the scale of the game was just way too big for the studio that it basically flopped in the end. And then let's talk about the producer. Again, the producer is, as you see, we talked about the roles in general before, but I'm sure you can notice now that these are a lot of people, okay? There is no way that this person, that this person, the CEO or the game director or whatever, can talk to all of these people or even can liaise with all of these people. So the producer's role is to mainly check with the tasks, check with the effort and the time frame where all of these can work together and can satisfy each other's dependencies. Because sometimes, let's say the level designer wants to finish level 1 of this game, okay? And level 1 needs specific type of art and needs specific type of, let's say, features or tools within the game. So they do not even need to nag the tools developer or the 3D artist, for example, because the producer has everything that they need. They just go and talk to these every day, nag them basically to make sure that they're on track and that they're going to deliver on what the level designer needs in a timely fashion. Okay, so this is, again, a typical game studio. This is definitely not 100% correct. You might find other studios that do not have a production team because they're too small, or sometimes you might not have a quality assurance team whatsoever because they like to do early access development, for example. Some teams might not have network developers or even game writers, as I said, depending on the project or the story of the project. Sorry. Okay, so this is a typical game studio. In some instances, you might find a strike team within a game studio. So a strike team is basically the bright minds, the professionals, or let's say the rock stars, okay, of each team. So let's say there is a strike team right here. Let's get back to it. So strike team would be like an additional team to all of these. This is a good example. As I said, I'm gonna share the presentation with you later on. But if you have ever played Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, I'm sure you have seen the dragons in the game. So the dragons were very problematic, so they had to assign a strike team to it. Actually, strike teams, because the studio size of Bethesda or ZeniMax in general is more than 200 people. So they had a lot of teams that can work concurrently and satisfy the problems back then. So again, the strike team would consist of very bright people, like very smart people from these teams, basically art, design, and development. So if somebody is a really great animator, they would be basically going to the strike team. Somebody is a really good gameplay programmer, they'd go to the strike team. Somebody is a really good level designer, they would go to the strike team. So basically, they're the team, they're like the SWAT team, I'd say, or like the problem solvers. So anything that needs a focused group to focus on and solve, that's where you allocate to the strike team. Okay. And wait, let's go to the next one. And this is a really good documentary. I really recommend you to check it out. Like once I send this, or you can even look for it on YouTube. The history of Bethesda Game Studios. It takes you from the very first game that they created, and how their thinking process have scaled up as the more games they created. Okay, this is what a pooled studio looks like. This is the type of studio that I worked in, and the type of studio that I have currently right now. So there are the same roles: lead art, lead design, lead development, lead game producer, etc. But these roles are being pooled to teams. So, for example, me as a game director and a managing director, I have clients coming to me, okay? I have clients coming to me, talking to me, hey, we need this type of game created. Like let's say client A wants an endless runner created. Client B wants a platformer created. Client 3 wants an RPG created, for example. So what I would do with the help of the leads here, what I would do is that we would construct teams. And the team would consist of the best person to tackle this project. So for example, you would have, sometimes I'd have a gameplay programmer that is really good in 2D games, while another programmer that is really good in 3D games. So if the game is in 2D, I would definitely choose that developer to get into the team to be able to satisfy the requirements of this project a lot better, right? So once we construct a team with the amount of developers that it needs, developer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, X, no matter how many resources that we need to pull from each category, that's when they start handling this client only. So that's their own focus, their sole focus, I'd say. Okay? Same thing goes to team 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So however many clients that come in that needs games to be made, you just have to construct a team and then just allocate that team to this project. Okay. And we're very close from ending the session. I hope it was a very short, it was a short one, not a boring one. But generally, let's talk about these quotes. And sorry. It's very important that you think of games and creating games as a way to express yourself, your ideas, your ideals as well. Because uh, not only are they a form of art, they speak of what you are. They're like a chunk of you. They're like a baby that you have begotten. So it's very important that you follow your heart when you're creating a game and not just create it because you think it might make money or you just think that it might be fun or you think that it might look cool. Try to express yourself in whatever you create and it's going to look absolutely perfect. And even if what you're creating is not fun, so if you can't make a game that is fun, try to make it interesting. So if what you have in mind, if what you're passionate about is games that are not fun, then try to make it as interesting as possible. So, for example, a lot of the games that I got addicted to, so for example, Crusader Kings, for example, are very fun to me. They're very interesting to me, but I've never to this date managed to convince any of my friends to play it with me or even try out the game because they just think that mashing buttons and controlling empires and that stuff looks just way too boring to them. So if you don't think that the game that you're creating is becoming fun, then just try to make it interesting to the target audience that you have in mind as much as possible. Plus, if you read about it, not all game studios know how to make their games fun because there's even a design process that is called finding the fun in video games. Like there is a stage within production, like once you finish creating your game, sometimes it's a hot mess. You don't know, you're looking at it and it's just not fun to play. So it's very essential that you sit with your, I'd say, partners or with your collaborators or colleagues and try to see where you can add aspects into the game to make it more fun to play. Okay? And yeah, this one is really fun. Writer of Metro. Game development, if you think of this role or if you think of this industry as a job, then it's really not for you because honestly speaking, to each one of you, you can find a lot better paying jobs in other sectors within the tech industry. Like I remember I was better paid when I was an IT manager because I told you guys earlier I was an IT support guy that climbed the career ladder to become an IT manager, right? And my salary back then was actually better than the salary that I'm paying myself right now as a game director. But I'm so passionate about game development. I love what I'm doing because I wake up every day. I like going to work. I don't find it as work because I'm having fun creating games. In a sense that I see it as a way of life. I like doing what I'm doing. I like learning about video games. I've been in video games now for over 7, 8 years, but I still like looking at tutorials. I still like reading about different games. I still like playing video games. I still like you know uh, sharing my experience, learning from other people's experience. And if you don't have the same feeling, and if you look at it as just a job, it's just gonna roll you down. Um, and it's just gonna feel, let's say, unfulfilling. Yeah, unfulfilling to pursue after a while. Especially since, as I said, it's not really that. I mean, it makes money. It makes a lot of money if you create your own games. But honestly, if you just want to have a job, pursuing a job as a software engineer is a lot easier than getting into game development. So yeah, and I suppose that will be it, guys. So thank you very much for listening to me. It's been a great pleasure uh, telling you about this, talking to you about game development. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Wait, let me just quit that instead of ending it. Yeah. Oh, is it being delayed? Thank you. Thank you for listening. You can raise your hand, I suppose, or whatever. Let me just stop sharing my screen. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me just share my Discord handle just in case and email. Hmm. Okay, so this is my Discord handle. Good. Why did it not write it down? There it is. And as for my email, you can send me right here. There you go. Okay. Well, since there is no questions, or is there? Okay, thank goodness. Okay, then thank you so much, guys, for listening in.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. So we look forward to working with you again, and I think our students will also be happy to hear about your experience in the field of creating games or related topics. So thanks, it was a
Likewise,
pleasure.
likewise. Have a beautiful day or night, everybody, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, the same to
Thank you.
you.
Take care. Bye bye.